Warning: the following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Hot Takes with Billy Biz. I wasn't kidding when I said this was going to be sporadic, but always worth the wait, I feel like, at least. Today, I am talking about something that I love so much I don't get to talk about a ton, which is Star Trek. We're talking about a trilogy within a larger set of movies, which I can't really think of an equivalent, but maybe my guest can. One of my most requested fan favorite guests. I couldn't do more episodes without at least one, which is Chris Schrader, Rogues Gallery podcast, formerly Hey, Do You Remember, which you guys had a reunion, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, sure did. E.T. We just, it's been a year almost already.
Has that been a year?
Yeah, we should probably do another one.
If Oasis can tour, then
I think they got the idea from us. They've been very open about that. Yeah, you're welcome,
I think
everybody.
those Gallagher brothers really have been taking your advice. So we're going to get into, today we're talking about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, which within the 6 movies of the original cast, 7 if you want to count Generations, it's very odd. I couldn't think of another example of like a mini trilogy within a larger serialized franchise. Like maybe those Bond, like the Daniel Craig ones, where it's like Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace and another one kind of form a loose big story, but I couldn't think of another one.
You're going to hate this example, but the first one that came to mind for me is the Thorn trilogy within the Halloween series. 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. One that I'm not super familiar with, so I can see why that would not jump into my immediate thought process.
You're going to find this hard to believe. It's not as tightly plotted. I love that series. I actually love those movies, some of them, but it's not as successful a trilogy as the Genesis trilogy.
So I want to take us back to not to Wrath of Khan. I want to go back for a minute to the motion picture, because I don't think that, well, actually, no, I'm negating my own thought here. I was going to say you can't talk about Wrath of Khan without talking about the motion picture, but I think my point is you absolutely can talk about Wrath of Khan without talking about the motion picture. I was trying to do some research. It's very hard to figure out. And again, going back to James Bond might be the only one I can think of. This, to me, feels like one of the first soft reboots of a franchise that I could think of.
Absolutely. There is a lot I like about the motion picture, but you could skip it. And The Wrath of Khan 100% works as a big screen continuation of the original series.
This, the motion picture, first of all, I hate it. I was trying to dance around. I hate it.
That's fair. It's fine.
It is literally the only one. I will watch Final Frontier 5 times in a row before I put on the motion picture. I think that the motion picture is cold. I don't recognize these characters. It does, to me, I don't see the A to C for how Spock would go from being on the Enterprise to all of a sudden being I'm going to purge all my stuff. The characters don't feel the same. But also I kind of feel like this timeline, and I didn't really realize this until I did some research, it is banana pants, because this movie comes out in 1979. It's supposed to take place 3 years after the end of their 5-year mission. I'm going to guess probably because Shatner wanted to pretend that he was still as young as he was on the show. Wrath of Khan comes out 3 years later, but takes place 12 years after the end of the motion picture. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. How is this possible? I don't think it did terrible box office, but Wrath of Khan truly felt whoops, I don't like that,
The apology tour. Well, yeah. No, the motion picture was successful. But just relative to how much they spent on it, to how much it made, the ratio it wasn't what they were looking for. And that's why there was some cost cutting measures for Star Trek 2. But I agree with everything you said. It still is pretty low in my ranking of Star Trek movies. Some of the things I don't like about the motion picture were alleviated by what they call the director's edition. Because the movie was released unfinished, basically. Right. There's a story possibly apocryphal about how for the premiere, the prints were still wet from the photo lab. It was right down to the wire. So that was not supposed to be the final version. They just kind of ran out of time. But yeah, there was definitely an awareness that, so the message was received. There is still an appetite for Star Trek. The audience is out there. This is not maybe the flavor of Star Trek they're looking for.
Yeah, everyone's running around in their Starfleet jammies, looking ridiculous. And I will say, we just did Strange New Worlds for my other show, Doug Defends, Real Lawyer Talks About Fake Stuff. And it came up that I'm like, literally the most disturbing thing I've ever seen, maybe in any movie, which is the real reason why I will not revisit this. That transporter accident at the beginning, literally scarred me for life.
It's fucked. My wife says all the time that if there's one piece of technology from Star Trek that she wishes were real now, it's the transporter, because she hates traveling. And I'm like, there's no fucking, I'm sorry, am I allowed to swear? I can redo it. Oh, I'm so
Whatever,
sorry.
Who cares anymore? Yep.
The colorful metaphors, as they would put it in Star Trek 4. I would never, ever step on a transporter, ever. But not for because of scenes like that, but also because of the whole thing about how technically you're broken down and reassembled. So every time you transport, you're dead. You cease to be. And then this other version of you arrives at the destination. No, thank you. I'm good. I'll take the shuttle.
And one last plug, if you want to find out if you'd be legally responsible since you do die when you get transported, go watch the Strange New World Self-Defense. Okay, so we get past the motion picture. And truly, if you're someone that's like I get in the mood to watch these Star Trek movies probably once a year. I've maybe put on motion picture once maybe twice in the last 20 years. Start at Wrath of Khan. It perfectly picks up, in my opinion, logically, where these characters probably would be after the end of season 3 of TOS. So Wrath of Khan, this is the one that it set the bar for Star Trek. I think to this day, even if a really great Star Trek movie comes out, it sometimes unfairly gets compared to Wrath of Khan, and I feel like that comparison has led them to make more Star Treks that try to just be Wrath of Khan, which doesn't work either. But I was watching it today because, I think the main crux of this episode is I think Search for Spock gets unfairly maligned, stuck in the middle. So I was trying to think, a lot of the criticisms for Search for Spock is that it feels very small, it feels very claustrophobic. And I was like, Wrath of Khan is literally 5 sets and it is small, but it doesn't feel that way. And today was the first time I watched it again this morning that I really looked for why doesn't this feel like the criticism for the second one? It's just shot so differently, so cinematically, where I feel like as we get further down in the Trek movies, we have Nimoy, and then later Jonathan Frakes are directing these. These are actors from the TV show, and they're directing it like a TV show. When Kirk walks out and gets his big entrance in Wrath of Khan, I mean, good God, that's like Indiana Jones. That silhouette of Kirk is such an image, and there's a lot of that in this movie.
Yeah, and what you're saying about how it feels like you could start here instead of with the motion picture, right down to the character introductions, the moments like that where you're reuniting with these old friends, and they're Shatner just photographed with such majesty in that moment. It's incredible. Yes, Nicholas Meyer is far and away a better writer and director than some of the other folks that directed Star Trek movies. I think that is I like Star Trek 3. I think its great misfortune is that it falls squarely in between not just better regarded films, but also just in terms of pure craft, just the filmmaking, better directed movies. Even Nimoy became a much better director in between 3 and 4. And when people talk about 3 feeling small, I've never heard that, but I do immediately. Yeah, I can see that. I think one of the other reasons is there is something so organic to the storytelling about Wrath of Khan. It kind of demands the claustrophobic atmosphere. I think Nick Meyer called it a submarine movie. That's what it's designed to feel like. The reason 3 might feel smaller by comparison is because it's aiming for something much bigger, a more epic story, but it's still being told on such a small scale. And I'm thinking instantly of everything on the Genesis planet and how, because they were forced to shoot on a soundstage, their ambition exceeds their budget, and both movies were made for a price compared to the motion picture. I just think 2 works so much better because whatever penny pinching they did, whatever corners they cut, they were just a lot smarter about it.
I mean, if you look at 2 and 3, like if you watch them back to back, 3 instantly feels different. And I was like, what is it? And it's like flatly lit. It looks
that too.
Visually, continuity wise, it looks much 3 looks much closer to the TV show than 2, which I feel like, just look at the color palette. Look at the way the bridge is lit. Like, it looks like it's on a dimmer and it's half dimmed. And then a lot of the scenes, they're at red alert. So you're, like you said, with the submarine movie, it feels more like Crimson Tide than it does, like the kind of splashy, and it works. I was, as I was watching it, I was like, this feels like a better Battleship movie than that Battleship movie that they made. It feels like Battleship. It's like, what if you took the concept of Battleship and put it into Star Trek? And that's kind of what this feels like. I do kind of wish that he had met face to face with Khan. That's like my big, like, if I could change one thing, like one face to face, just one.
Yeah, that is, I understand why it plays out the way it does. But yeah, I was thinking about that today. And this came up when my podcast Rogues Gallery covered Wrath of Khan, that it's just through the view screens. And I bet there are a lot of people that maybe don't even realize that until you point it out. But I don't know. I'm torn on this. I actually kind of like that they managed to still make it feel so personal, and like,
I just don't know if, like, Khan, being the character he is, there's like 3 or 4 times in this movie, kind of like Heat, where it's like, oh man, you would have won if your lust for vengeance hadn't been there. You would have won. And the only time that it kind of like really hits me that I'm just like, this probably is something your character would not do, is when he tells Captain Tyrell, kill Admiral Kirk. I'm like, I feel like you would want to do that yourself, and yet you're not even seeing it. I feel like you'd at least want to see it. That again, these are like minor criticisms, but it's just like, in a movie that's like paced perfectly, it's so brisk. In a movie that just kind of like, it's such a great villain, like what if Heath Ledger's Joker never shared a scene with Christian Bale's Batman? Like, that would be a bummer,
Well, I mean, they do, just not literally. They are facing off. They are talking to each other. No, I know I get what you're saying. I do. Yeah. But I don't know. I do kind of dig this about this one, because even once you get into 3 and it's like, well, of course it has to end with fisticuffs on the planet as everything's exploding. I like that. Yeah. Nick Meyer was just pretty single-minded about, this is what I'm going for. This is the vibe. And this is how that plays out.
I mean, I can understand from a script writing perspective of, you can't put Kirk and Khan in a situation where they're going to fight, because clearly Kirk stands zero. Like, none of them do. It's just not possible. This is not the original series, you know, like look at Ricardo Montalban's pecs. They're going to destroy you. What I thought could have been cool, and again, like, I never want to criticize a movie for them not doing an idea that I had, and I wasn't even born yet on top of that. But I think it would have been cool. There's a couple times in this movie, and maybe I am like really reaching and I'm seeing things that aren't there, where like Kirk is separated from the object to which he is talking to. Even when he goes into Spock's quarters, we get that really cool shot of we're just on Spock and we just see Kirk in the mirror, which to me feels like a foreshadowing of what's going to happen later, where again, we're separated by a piece. You could say the same thing with Khan in the view screen. Like, he's still separated from his main objective. I think maybe it would have been cool if Khan somehow was down on Regula 1. He was next to the Genesis missile or whatever it is, and Kirk goes to try to stop him, and there's some sort of force field, and he can't get to him, and Khan beams him out just to be like, haha, fuck you, you know, you're not going to get it. Even just to really hammer in that, like, every time in this movie that Kirk is so close, there's almost an invisible wall that is stopping him. But what can you do?
No, I like that. One of the other things I kind of dig about keeping them separated is if the whole idea with Khan thematically is sins of the past coming back. I like that this helps perpetuate the whole like boogeyman aspect of him. More of like a phantom-like figure than something you can like reach out and touch. You can't defeat me the way, you know, you would otherwise. And also a leveling of the playing field for once you get into that climax in the nebula. Cause you're right. If it's Khan and Kirk squaring off, I crushed your skull between my pecs. That's it. We're done.
Booby press done.
That you can't booby press him, Khan. You gotta use your smarts. And that's one thing that's set up so well in Space Seed is that Khan does respect Kirk. You know, he goes in, when he first boards the Enterprise, there is such arrogance to him. He really is looking down on everyone else. And it's great how that arrogance, that's something that continually will come back to bite him. But there's a moment in Space Seed where Kirk catches him. Khan uses the phrase we, and I can't remember the exact sentence, but instead of saying I, he says we, and Kirk catches it and says we, and Khan just smiles and says excellent, because he's so like thrilled. It's like, you got me, fine, like you are okay, you are worthy of me. And so yeah, to continue on with that, to have it be that kind of a matchup at the end. I don't know. Look, I hear what you're saying. I know there are a lot of people that would probably agree with you. I've thought this before, but watching it this time with this in mind again, I was just like, I don't know. I'm pretty satisfied with. I kind of like they went this route. I don't
feel unsatisfied. Let me be clear. I'm just saying, like, what a beautiful ice cream sundae. If I wanted just an extra little cherry, you know, totally. That would have been. But otherwise, like, you know, it's so funny. I said like this movie just feels paced in a way like some of my other favorite movies, like Back to the Future or like, you know, Terminator, where I'm just like, there's no wasted scene in this movie. There's no scene that doesn't ultimately add to something. But then I looked into how they made this movie, and there's no way this should have worked. Where Nicholas Meyer was like, hey, if you like a line of dialogue, if you like a set piece, if you like this, just throw it all on a whiteboard and we'll figure out how to make it. Like, this should have been the worst movie ever made, period. You know?
And the turnaround time on it, because it was like, they basically told him, we don't have a script. And if we don't have one by this date, which I can't remember, it was something insane, like 10 days or something, we can't make the movie. It's just not going to happen. And he wanted the job so badly. He was like, I think he was like, you don't even have to pay me. Just, tell me everything you liked about every previous version of this film. Not just different drafts of the same story, wildly different takes on what Star Trek II could have been. Make a list of everything you like. I will Frankenstein together a version that incorporates everything. And to do that in such a tight time frame and to have it feel as tight and cohesive, this is thematically, this is the tightest Star Trek movie by far. It blows my mind. And it's crazy too, because even comparing it to the next movie, which had a much more straightforward development, and somehow that's the one that feels more like a patchwork of different ideas that aren't always playing nice with each other. And it's maybe trying to do just a little bit too much. I'm with you. This should not have worked. It's pretty incredible.
I feel like for every Wrath of Khan, or I know Iron Man, the first one was very similar. Like, you are playing Russian roulette, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose. And then you're going to get like Hancock, which you're like, oof, that was 2 different movies jammed together in the middle. So the fact that this is like so good is a miracle. I will say, and I usually start the episode and I just forgot, but I want to go back for just a second. I got into Star Trek, funnily enough, in 1998. I remember because I was so excited for the Phantom Menace, because I'm a Star Wars guy, that I was just like, I need something space. I need to watch something space. Nothing is holding, like, I can't hold, I need a filler until May. And Star Trek Insurrection hit theaters that December, and I'd always kind of avoided Star Trek, so I was like, there's a barrier to entry. I was like, I know that there's a show called Voyager. I know there's one called Next Generation. I know there's one called Deep Space Nine. I don't even know where to start. But for some reason, I was like, fuck it, let's go see this Insurrection, which in hindsight is one of the very bad Star Trek movies, but it was good enough that I was like, this is kind of cool. And then my dad was like, well, and my dad is like, he's never seen a Star War. He is not, he's not fantasy oriented at all. He's like, I used to watch Star Trek. I'll watch the movie with you, movie being Wrath of Khan. And so I watched that. I got very into the original cast because they would show it on Sci-Fi after school. And Kirk is my captain. No shade to Picard, but like, it's kind of like no choice to me. Like, I don't understand Picard people. But Wrath of Khan was the first one that, like, I watched the movies before I watched a lot of these episodes. So I saw Wrath of Khan before I ever saw Space Seed. So I actually, when I saw Space Seed, like, a lot later, was like, oh, cool. Like, that guy was already there. I had no idea, which is just another strength of the movie, which is they told me everything I need. I just assumed that was a made up backstory that never happened.
Yeah. Yeah, there are things about, because I was the same way. I saw Wrath of Khan before Space Seed, and there were actually aspects of the movie I think worked better because I wasn't bringing in all of this, prior knowledge. Like especially the moment when they beam down and when he realizes it's the Botany Bay. Right. That moment, I was like, why is he freaking out? What is going on? I was like, it made me lean in. I was so intrigued. There were little things like that throughout the film that they played even better. But you're right. The stuff that you needed to know from Space Seed, it's not even just like exposition dumps. It's worked into the writing so organically. Like, it really does tell you everything you need to know in order to
love that, like,
enjoy the film.
You never regaled your captain with the tale of meeting me. Like, the arrogance is just steeped it. And maybe my favorite acting moment of the entire movie is when he's like, Admiral Kirk. He's like, Admiral. Like, the disgust and shock that not only was he left behind, but Kirk is now top of the food chain. Like, that reaction, like, there's a ton of those in this movie. But that one, to me, like, I'm always like, Admiral. Like, I wait for that moment. I love it so much. 1998, by the way, I was in 7th grade, is a terrible time to become a Star Trek fan, just in case you were all curious.
I'll tell you right now. So I'm damn near a lifelong Star Trek fan. Next Generation premiered when I was 5 years old. I remember sitting on the living room floor of my mom's condo watching that very first episode. Next Gen was my gateway. When I was a kid, this original crew was who you went to go see in the movies, and then the Next Gen crew, this is who you watched on TV. So I'm really curious, like, because as you said, you're a Star Wars guy, first and foremost. I'm not asking you to pit one against the other. I'm just curious, what is it you think you get out of Star Trek that you maybe don't always find in other science fiction franchises?
I just talked about this on another show. Star Wars to me is kind of like, here, especially these days, is like, here's kind of where you are, and here's probably what's going to happen. Here's what's happened before. Here's what's kind of happening again. Here's, and it's ragtag, and I love like the lore and the mythology. It's very fantasy. Star Trek to me is like, here's what it could be, and here's what every, like, strip away like powers and mysticism and all this other stuff. It's like, to me, like my all-time favorite movie is Apollo 13. And it's actually one of my favorite stories just in our US history, because I love the idea of like, what if we all just came together, especially in a moment of crisis, and we just let go of everything but the best ideas, and we work together to achieve something absolutely impossible. And that's kind of what Star Trek is like built on. So I think for me, Star Trek is much more like, Star Wars will fire me up and Star Trek will inspire me, I guess, is like the short answer of that.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. And I agree. There's the whole aspirational aspect of, it's just, this is who we could be if we could just get out of our own way. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I also too, it's just like, and this is like, as I get older, this doesn't mean anything at all to me, but when I'm younger and I'm trying to form my identity, and kind of what I like and who I am and everything, Star Wars was something I kind of had to share with everybody. Like, Star Wars wasn't a thing where, like, if you love Star Wars, there was probably another kid who had more toys than you, knew more things than you. I never felt like I had to share Star Trek. Like, Star Trek felt very personally mine, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yes. When I said that there was never a good time to be a Star Trek fan, what I meant was, this was not something I was ever allowed to tell the other kids. There was never a point in time where Star Trek was cool. Like, it's so funny to me that whenever we pretend that Star Wars has ever been anything but mainstream, I love it. I'm a fan. I'm just saying, like, it's, that's monoculture stuff. Right. Star Trek is, my entire childhood, I only had one other friend who ever admitted to watching Next Generation, and this was not something we talked about. There was just this understanding that, like, we cannot let the others know. So this was a very private thing for me, and that really deepened my connection to it in a lot of ways. And yeah, just, it made it feel a lot more personal. So this is a very, very personal franchise for me, and especially I got into the original series later. Like, it's so funny. It existed for the longest time as just clips inside documentaries or behind the scenes specials for other Star Trek media was my only exposure to it. And not because I wasn't interested. It was just, it was not widely available. Right. There weren't reruns when I was a kid. Once it was in syndication again, and there was a channel that was showing it, I feel the same way about the original series as I do the Twilight Zone, which is like, whatever elements of it that may come across as dated now, the core concepts, the ideas, the storytelling, it's so good. That stuff doesn't matter. And I was actually quite charmed by the retro aspect of it when I was a kid, even more so now. So long story short, I have been and always shall be a fan of most incarnations of Star Trek, particularly the Berman era from the 90s, but definitely the original series as well. And this era of Star Trek movies that we're talking about, there's stuff I enjoy about all of them. Some are obviously better than others, sure. But even the ones I didn't like that much as a kid, like the motion picture or Star Trek V, I have softened on them quite a bit over time. 2 and 6 are my favorite Star Trek movies, not just of this era, of like all the Star Trek movies, but 3 and 4 would be right behind those at this point.
I even like my memories of watching these for the first time, which was I watched Wrath of Khan, And my dad was like, yeah, I really like that. I was like, what's the next one? He's like, I don't know. I don't think I ever saw it. Like, like my dad dropped off and I was like, no, I'm invested. So like when people talk about missing blockbuster nights, my first memory is like, well, I got to go get part 3. And I remember watching it for some reason in my parents' room with their VCR with like pizza on a Friday night, like, got to know what happens next. So these are very personal kind of like stories for me, even though I know they're not. But to that end, this is something where it's like, I do not hold Wrath of Khan responsible for this. I hold just the time that I lived in responsible, which is Spock's death, while very well done, was kind of hollow for me even the first time I saw it, because it's like, well, obviously the next one is called The Search for Him, and obviously the one after that, he's on the box of the video. So
yeah, 3 would be a very underwhelming movie if they got to the end and they're like, shit, we didn't find him.
Yeah.
Where'd he go? Oh no.
He's gone. I get it. So it was one of those things, and when we wrap up this whole episode, I think it's kind of like how I feel about this trilogy if I really think about it in hindsight, where it was just like, it didn't hit because I knew that eventually that status quo would be restored.
Yeah.
And it to me, it felt more of like, okay, well, now I just want to see the next one. It wasn't like, let me sit here and mourn Spock. Like, I almost kind of felt like Sesame Street, like, you dummies, he's on the Genesis planet. He's obviously fine. Like, let's go,
Yeah. So I actually owned Star Trek 3 on VHS. We owned 3 and 4. Those were the only Star Trek movies we had for a long time.
Strange. Why would your parents not buy 2 at the minimum?
These are the search for Spock. No, the question is the search for Star Trek 2. What
Did
are we doing?
You also only have the first VHS of Titanic, where you're like, shit, I wonder what happens next.
I just want to live in a world where everything worked out. So
yeah, just a
they bought the complete set, and I just threw that second tape in the trash. I'll write my own ending, thank you. So I saw Star Trek 3 before I saw Star Trek 2, so spoiler alert. Okay. But even still, the ending of Star Trek 2 got me. It continues to get me every time I watch it. I think one of the other things I love about Nick Meyer as a director is that, like, far and away, I think this is Shatner's best performance as Kirk is in Star Trek 2.
Interesting. I don't agree, but I don't agree, but I think you're 100% valid, if that makes sense.
I just think he really knows how to tone down a lot of the Shatnerisms. And, there are some really great stories about how he broke Shatner out of, reaching into that same old bag of tricks. And it's my favorite Shatner Kirk performance. It's my favorite, like, Kirk, Spock, McCoy dynamic, that trio, which is the beating heart of this era of Star Trek and of the original series. This is just perfection. This is my favorite version of that. So every time it gets to that point, when we covered it for my podcast, my wife was laughing at me. I had tears in my eyes. She heard me sniffle, and she looks at me and she's like, "Oh God." I'm like, I can't help it. I said, "You think I want this?" I'm so sorry. It really gets me.
This baggage for 30 years.
And I think it's so beautiful that the way that movie ties everything in a bow, where the only thing I would change about the ending is that I wish right before Khan's own torpedo comes back to blow up that ship, because I love that about the climax, that Khan literally destroys himself. Because you're right, there were so many opportunities where he had won. His men even tell him at one point, we don't need to we have everything we wanted, let's go. But no, he is so single-minded, so myopic about this vengeance against Kirk, that he winds up sacrificing everyone around him and then eventually himself. The only moment I think is missing, I wish he looked up into the view screen and saw the Enterprise warping away right before the ship gets destroyed, to know that he had lost. But anyways, like, after that, on the heels of that, and then you get the realization that Spock has been injured and then he dies. And then the funeral and the way his voice cracks as he's delivering the eulogy, that always makes me start crying all over again. And then there's this really beautiful moment where right after he says goodbye to Spock, David comes to him and they have that exchange where David tells him that he's proud to be Kirk's son. And so David and Carol, that was another aspect of, these things you thought you had buried, these things you left in the past, they're coming back. And all of the stuff with Khan, those sorts of feelings, what he represents, Khan as a character, that's backwards. That's self-destruction. David, this is the way forward. And so Kirk loses his best friend, but then gains a son. And there is something really beautiful about those final moments, and the whole thing about what you said earlier about how this film is the one that finally embraced the fact that these actors are getting older. The whole story is built around this idea of aging and trying to reconcile that you're not the 30-year-old captain gallivanting around the universe, but he also doesn't feel old enough to be like this admiral and this doesn't suit me either. And where do I fit and who am I now? And then to go through all of this and that final line about, when somebody asks him how he feels, and I feel young. And the way he says that, it's just that also, the waterworks all over again. I think the ending packs such a wallop. And that's Nick Meyer, man. You can't overstate how much he brought to that film and how much that it kind of saved Star Trek. I mean, I don't know what the franchise looks like without this film. And the other interesting thought experiment, as it relates to the way the film ties everything up with a bow, I understand why Nick Meyer, when approached for Star Trek 3, said, we just killed Spock off and now you immediately want to bring him back. No, I cannot be a part of that. And as much as I love a lot of what followed, it is interesting to consider what happens if Nimoy decides to stay retired from this role, if David is maybe living his best life off screen somewhere, if we don't undermine a lot of his character with some of the choices they made in the next film. It's just, it's kind of wild to think about what this would have turned into, how the franchise would have evolved.
I do, and we're going to talk about 3 in just a second here. As much as I do love 3, part of me does think it would have been nice to have one adventure in the middle where the absence of Spock really and maybe if this was made today, that's exactly what would happen. And then your stinger at the end would be but wait, what if he's not gone, to set up your part 4, which is Search for Spock. That didn't happen. We just immediately turned it around and went back for it. It is what it is. But I will say and I don't know how, because I'm a millennial and my brain can't comprehend pre-internet very much. But I guess there were rumors that Spock was going to die before, well before this movie came out. And I absolutely, to this day, love the hardcore trolling that Nicholas Meyer does in the first 5 minutes of this movie, killing everybody. And then having the first thing that Kirk says to Spock is, "Aren't you dead?" I could totally see going into this movie being oh, these rumors, they just got it wrong. They got the context wrong. And then being very caught off guard by the end that it's oh no, I was trolled, Totally.
Yeah. Well, and it's also pretty widely accepted to be the truth at this point that the source of the leak that Spock was getting killed off was Gene Roddenberry, who, that's the other big thing about Star Trek 2, is this is the point in Star Trek where the creator, Gene Roddenberry, gets sidelined, and they give him that ceremonial title of creative consultant or whatever. But from 2 to 5, a guy named Harv Bennett sort of becomes the shepherd of the franchise. And so anytime, because they had to run things by Gene and they were under no obligation to take his notes, but anytime they were going to do something he didn't like, he would just leak it and let the fans start an uproar about it. And that was one of the things. Yeah, Spock dying. That was, I think, almost certainly Gene Roddenberry.
So let's talk now. We've danced around it, but let's get into Search for Spock. So this comes out pretty quickly, 2 years later, um, after Wrath of Khan. Like I said, a lot of the criticism that I've seen is that it feels like kind of like a made for TV movie after the last one. I think we've already talked about like aesthetically, it's Leonard Nimoy chose to light it differently. Like it just it's lit differently. I also like there's a lot of movement in Wrath of Khan. Like even something is like, when those scientists on the regular one station are talking about what is happening, it's in this very cool circular shot, which just feels almost like, out of place for Star Trek later on, because like when we get to Search for Spock, it's like single close up wide, master.
Yeah.
Like we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not doing crane shots. We're not trying to get fancy. This is shot like an episode, which to me, like I can appreciate the continuity of this feeling like an episode of the show. I'm okay with it. One thing I will say that does feel made for TV movie, and I do think it actually really hurts. I think Kirstie Alley is a star. And as much as I appreciate Robin Curtis, she did nothing wrong. It does feel like the made for TV version of Saavik, and it kind of feels like a different character. This doesn't feel like the quoting regulations kind of headstrong hothead. Instead, this is kind of a much more nuanced, like, I'm not going to go so far as to say annoying, but it's like her holier than thou-ness, especially towards David. I'm just like, where were you the last movie?
Yeah. So this is one of the weird things about seeing 3 first, and as often as I did, that by the time I saw Star Trek 2, it was like, whoa, that's not Saavik.
Yeah,
so I had the opposite experience. And no, but they feel like totally different characters. And it's interesting because one of these actresses is being directed by the person you would think is kind of the authority on how to play Vulcan, which is such a tricky thing to do. I feel like I can probably count on one hand the number of actors in all of Star Trek that I feel like you nailed it. That's it. No notes. They're just being directed very differently. And I don't mind Robin Curtis, but it is jarring, especially if you're watching them back to back. It's funny. I remember the criticism about it feeling more like a TV show. I remember detractors of 2 saying that about that one when compared to the motion picture, which, I mean, like, for all its faults, it is this big, sweeping, expensive film. And then 2 was kind of famously passed off to a lot of the guys from the TV division. But it just comes back to the visual storytelling. Nick Meyer is a visual storyteller. Nimoy was figuring it out. And so there is I bet there was a lot of deferring to his cinematographer about, well, how do we shoot this scene? Oh, master, over the shoulders, close-ups, bing, bang, boom, we're done.
I mean, I will say okay, maybe that's a generalization, because one of the scenes I really do like is where Sarek comes to Kirk and it's like, why did you leave my boy? And then
it's so good.
And they shoot it with like the eyes and the mouth. Like there are artistic choices, but they feel much fewer and far between than Wrath of Khan. So like it does feel very different in that sense. It also kind of feels like, okay, going back to Saavik for a minute. This is not even so much a criticism of Search for Spock as it is just a part of the Star Trek lore that I think is just really stupid, and I will get a lot of hate for this, but I don't care. No, we don't have sex with 14-year-old Spock.
What is that?
What?
It's like, hey, you're hot. No. I'm 11 minutes old. Let's explore this. No. Yeah.
No. And the weird sexual tension of their fingers touching. I'm like, no. Because like the implications of like, clearly this was her mentor and someone she looked up to. And now it's like her duty to like fuck them. And then from what I gather, the reason she doesn't go in the next one with them is because she's pregnant with her mentor's baby. No, full stop. No, I hate all of this. I hate it. I hate it. Nothing to add other than Ponfar is the worst. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Like, just go jack off in a cup. Does it? Your dick doesn't know. Like, you're not gonna die if like your sperm. Like, no. Jack off in a sock, and your body will be like, oh, okay, he had sex, so he'll live. No,
there were no socks. So this what are you gonna do?
I just jerk off into your big missile coffin or something. I don't know. It just takes me out, because at that point, and I know this is so judgmental, and I'm not trying to be, but I just look at Saavik after that scene. I'm just like, you're gross. You're dirty. You know what you did, and you're not going to tell anyone. I don't like this. It's a real hang up for me.
No, that's fair. I kind of feel like I realized this time when I was watching it that it really is every time we cut back to Genesis that the momentum, it slows down a bit for me. It's all of that stuff and the Klingons that kind of drag down my overall opinion of the film, because there are some incredibly high highs in this. This has one of my favorite sequences in any Star Trek movie. It's like what I think of when I think of Star Trek 3. And even I'm at some point last year, my wife was like, let's go through all the Star Trek movies in order. I'm like, whoa, twist my arm. Okay. And we were probably 2/3 of the way through this one, maybe a little further. And she was like, why don't people like this one? And yeah, I mean, I think it has the great misfortune of following, one of the greatest Star Trek movies, the greatest, according to a lot of fans. But that doesn't mean that it's like, there's some really, really good stuff in here.
Yeah. And again, like I'm being a little facetious for entertainment value. Like, does Ponfar ruin the movie for me? No, but it definitely feels like how did you want this to play kind of moment, And it definitely,
yeah.
And I do feel like when you say like it drags it down, it's like I was about to say earlier, I forgot, which is like Wrath of Khan has this innate sense of urgency that Search for Spock doesn't, which is funny because Search for Spock is the one that actually has the ticking clock of the planet going to explode. And yet, for some reason, there's kind of that sense of dread and urgency more felt in Wrath of Khan. I will give you that 100%.
I think a lot of it does come down to Nimoy as a first-time director. There's just, the pacing, the staging of certain scenes, the look of the movie. And also, I mean, this decision was out of his hands. They just didn't have the money. But all of the Genesis stuff, if they had shot on location, as was the original plan, it wouldn't fix, some of the deeper cracks in the film, but it would spackle over a few of them. I mean, it would change how I feel about the movie quite a bit.
I get it. I also like, and maybe I'm just an apologist, but it's just like, but that's the aesthetic I'm used to with Star Trek. Like,
completely, I totally understand that too. Absolute, yes, I can see that point of view for sure.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's like, yeah, this feels exactly like it should. If it's, and I get it, it's a movie, it should feel bigger, but at the same time, like continuity wise, it fits for me. This movie, Search for Spock, has like, when I think of like, why do I like this one so much? It's like, it's not so much the sum, it's there's a lot of little parts that I just love. And when you said Wrath of Khan, you think is Shatner's best performance, I think Search for Spock has some of Shatner's best acting ever and some of Shatner's most Shatneriest acting ever. And the fact that they're in the same movie, I kind of love that, to be honest.
That's the moment where he reacts to David's death is definitely one of the very best things Shatner has ever done.
Do you think that he meant to fall down? It's an urban legend. You know?
I've always heard that it was an accident and they left it in. And I hope that's true because it certainly makes for a better story. But yeah, that moment's incredible. I wish that death actually like felt like anything to me as a viewer. I'm really disappointed with the way David is used in this film.
David. Okay. We'll circle back to Shatner because I have more to say on that, but David. Okay. This is probably, there's two things that drive me kind of bananas about this movie. One is Savick. I just can't get past it. And I kind of have to treat it as a different character. The other, especially when you watch this back to back with Wrath of Khan, is what they did with David. This makes no sense. You have this character who in the first one is just like, he's built on this virtue of like, they're going to take what we did and pervert it. And they're going, like he's just so anti-authority and just so pious about the whole project and just kind of what his values are. And then the planet starts to destabilize in this one. And the fact that he's just like, oopsies, I kind of used something I shouldn't have. Should I not have done that? That might have. And then Savick being like, look at every horrible thing you did. It's like, first of all, he did not fire that missile. Khan did. So don't go at like everyone acts like he made this huge thing and it was his decision to launch it. It wasn't. For all we know, that was the showroom prototype, storeroom demo, and he wasn't actually going to use it. But two, like him using the illegal shortcut science, it's one of those things where I hate when sequels do this, where it now kind of undermines everything he does and says in the last one, where I'm just like, get the fuck off your high horse, because I have to think that your mom is not stupid. She probably figures you did this too. Someone on your team had to be like, how did you magically solve this? But if nothing else, and this is where I actually messaged you, because I saw on IMDb trivia, which we all know can be full of shit and you have to kind of do some research sometimes, that I saw something that said the writers were like, well, the reason that we kind of had David die over Savick was that it was kind of like he had to pay for the sins of what he did with Genesis. And then I found Leonard Nimoy talking in Starlog, where he basically confirms that, yes, this is kind of like, the consequences of that. And I'm just like, that's a hat on a hat to me that undermines the tragedy of what just happened. The whole point to me is that these Klingons unmercifully kill one of these two innocent people. And instead of Kirk being like, how could you do this? We're supposed to think like, well, no, Kirk, it's okay because he did something wrong. So he kind of had to make up for it. Like, you didn't need it. To me, you did not need this extra bit of subplot. Like, Genesis could have just not worked. Like, this didn't need to be there. And I feel like it retroactively ruins David. Now I will step off my soapbox.
No, I totally agree with you. It's not the issue is like, first of all, as far as increasing the dramatic stakes and like by killing off a character, okay, I understand the temptation, especially after Wrath of Khan, and like, okay, so what's this film's big moment going to be? Side note, I think it already has one. I think it has something that was far and away more devastating than David's death, and it would have been enough for fans of Star Trek. Like, that it was what we were all going to be talking about as we walked out of this one anyways. If you have to kill someone, does it have to be David? Because by bringing him back, yeah, if this is the way they're going to use him, I really would just prefer that, like, Kirk just met this kid. If you look at Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, this is like the busiest weekend anyone from Starfleet has ever had. This is not a particularly expansive time frame. He just met this kid. There is no relationship. There's hardly anything to mourn yet. So I think, letting David go off and live his life and just be out there somewhere, because I don't think he was in the original treatment for Star Trek 3. And if they brought him back only to have a character that audiences recognized, so, like, to kill off, I think that sucks. And I think there was either a better way to do it, or if the entire point, because I'm with you, I think it's way more effective that this is just the randomness, this is the brutality of our antagonist. It doesn't have to be David then.
And the thing is, like, yes, but also just like, okay, if it is David, fine. But why does David need a reason to die?
That too. Yeah.
Shouldn't the point be that there is no reason? Like, shouldn't that make us as viewers feel even more devastated that this happened senselessly? Not like, oh, well, at least he redeemed himself for what he did. It's like, but no.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand that there is something extra tragic about the fact that Kirk just met him. You know, he just had this reconciliation and it's ripped away from him. And it definitely sets the stage for things in Star Trek 6 and relations between the Klingon Empire and the Federation that are, it's good stuff. There is just something clumsy about the execution, the literal execution of it, it doesn't sit quite right with me. Or maybe I wouldn't even feel this strongly about it. Like, the death wouldn't feel so flat to me if David had just been utilized in another way in this story. Just every time we cut back to him in Saavik, it's like, this should be the most consequential thing happening in this film, and it just feels like the most boring.
It's just so funny because you had said, a little bit back, he loses a friend but gains a son. But
then they flip it.
Perfectly fine to throw that son away to get the friend back. And
look, listen, as long as we're keeping the balance. Hey.
But again, like, and I'll bring it home afterwards, but it's just like, yeah, these three movies tell such a great story, but we're also taking a very long way around to just get back to the status quo. Like, by the time we get to 5, theoretically, if you could jump on it 2 or 5 and it's about the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and it's
so like when you keep that in mind, but yeah, it just kind of feels like, and Spock gets this beautiful eulogy, like, it was human. And with David, it's literally, bye, David. Like,
that's the other part of it. There's hardly anyone that acknowledges it. Oh, it's just David.
Like, see you later, David. You ain't genociding from this one. I'm crapping on it, but like I said, those are kind of my two biggest nitpicks are those two characters that just coincidentally are that part of the movie. Let's go to the part that we both said that we like, which is the heist of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
When I said like one of my favorite, like some of Shatner's best acting, one of my favorite shots, and I don't know why I love it so much, but when he's having that drink with the general or whoever it is, the Starfleet commissioner, and it just shows Shatner's face or Kirk's face, and it's pushing in as he's like, if you do this, your career's over. And what he's able to convey in his eyes, his mouth isn't moving, nothing, but watching him weigh the consequences of what he's about to do, he just like, that's an acting, like, you don't associate William Shatner with subtle acting. And I love that push in because you see the entire conversation in his head. And it's a short one because he makes up his mind in that minute. And I love that shot so much.
It's a great moment. And just like, even though 2 is my favorite performance, that doesn't mean I think any of the others are,
sure.
He's still great. And 6 especially also has incredible stuff. My favorite section of this movie is everything from when he goes back to the crew and they say, what's the word? The word is no.
So I am therefore going anyway.
Everything from that until they warp away from the Excelsior, that is like, that's where the movie peaks for sure. I've seen this movie too many times to count. All of this plays so well. I was halfway through this sequence this time, and I realized I had the biggest, stupidest smile on my face. I wish there was a way to do this that didn't involve sidelining Uhura until the ending, but her final line in this part, where right before she beams them away and she says, "Oh, an admiral, all my hopes." I started to tear up. This is all so good. The music in this section, the James Horner score for this is like, oh man, this is so good. And it happens so early. I always remember this as being like, yeah, this is how we get into Act 3. No, this is the end of Act 1.
Yeah. I don't know why, because I've also seen this movie more times than I can count, and maybe I'm just stupid. Because it doesn't even match up timeline. But every time I see this movie and it cuts to Uhura and the other guy, I'm like, is that James Marsden? Every single time I see this movie.
Oh, that's funny. This time I was like, yeah, I can totally see that. But I was thinking like, oh, he has a real Ethan Hawke vibe to him. And even with just some of his line delivery. But yeah.
I always think that guy is someone famous and he's a nobody. No offense if you're watching this, sir. But I just, for some reason, I was like, is that James Marsden? I'm like, no, it's not. You've looked this up too many times.
Yeah, he was 7.
Yeah, he was like 6 or 7. So
that's a very mature 7-year-old. So this is one of the things that's actually really great about Star Trek 3 is that because Spock is sidelined for most of it, that does give the rest of the crew a chance to kind of step up, and we see a little bit more from some of them. You said Kirk is your favorite captain. Does that mean he is also your favorite of the big 3, the Kirk, Spock, McCoy trio?
So no, my favorite is McCoy. So that's probably another reason why I like this movie so much, is because finally McCoy gets a chance to shine.
Yeah, totally. I'm right there with you. And then, so outside of the big 3, do you have a favorite crew member?
Outside of the big 3, I probably Scotty.
We are in lockstep, buddy.
Yeah.
For sure.
But like, I love movie Scotty more than I love show Scotty.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, I really like when he takes on this kind of like kindly grandfather type vibe.
Yeah, I mean, him like damaging the Excelsior, and I even love the kind of corny brake sound effect that they put in there, like car breaking down, you know, the old Buick sound. I'm just like, no, it works, and I kind of love it, you know.
So just real quick, so as long as we're kind of ranking certain things and talking about this sort of stuff, the Excelsior, I remember my dad being over the moon for this ship. He thought it was like the best looking starship he'd ever seen. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have a favorite Enterprise?
Yes, probably not the popular choice.
Okay.
But I do love the Enterprise E from like First Contact or Insurrection. Okay. That's my favorite. So, I think it's just so sleek looking.
Yeah, you know? That era of ship design, everything looks so squashed to me.
It does look very narrow, yeah.
That was just the way all of it was trending at the time. I like when there's a little bit more separation. This Enterprise, the Constitution class refit, and then it's basically the same as Enterprise A. I think this is the most beautiful starship design there ever was. The Enterprise D is a very close second, but this is when I think of Star Trek, this is the ship I think of. And so it was crazy to learn that the original plan, when they decided that, you know, the big moment that this movie was going to have was the destruction of this Enterprise, that whenever they got their new ship, it was going to be the Excelsior. And that's why it's named, you know, Enterprise Excelsior, because it's just the ship. Who cares? And Gene Roddenberry was like, that ship is one of the cast members. You cannot do that. And yeah, thank God. That's like, man, the Excelsior is a good looking ship, but no,
isn't it pretty much what the D is going to be anyway?
I can see how there's
some DNA.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so funny because this was another one where, just like Spock's death, like I was well aware that the Enterprise was
The-
going to
yeah.
come back. So
Yeah.
another moment that probably would have been shocking to me, but it was just like, okay, you know, like,
I know. Yeah, I get that. And it was the same thing for me, but there is definitely something about the fact that in the canon of these stories, this is the original ship. It was 20 years of Star Trek stories with this ship. And this is another thing where it's like, if I could add in one more shot, if I could add in one shot to Wrath of Khan, it would be him watching the Enterprise warp away. If I could add in one shot to Search for Spock, it would be Kirk giving that bridge and that chair one last look after they set the self-destruct sequence. They just shimmy out of there. I get it. There's a countdown, but like, man, but nevertheless, I feel the weight of that moment. This is so silly. I still have kind of a hard time looking at it. I don't like seeing it, but one of my other favorite parts of this movie is as it goes streaking across the sky and you get that amazing shot of all of them in silhouette watching it. And then when you get the reverse angle and it's Kirk saying, "My God, what have I done?" And McCoy's response, what you always do, turn death into a fighting chance to live. Like, that's an amazing moment.
yeah,
I got goosebumps right now just saying that. It's so good.
I respect the weight of that moment. I wish it hit, but I can't divorce myself of also knowing that they're going to get their Enterprise back at the end of the next one. You know what I mean? I understand it's not the same one, but
No, but it's one of those funny things where, again, because of the time frame, I don't think it's been that long, and we just have this here sitting for you. I know the accepted canon at this point is that it's the Yorktown, that they just rechristened it, and so they had another Constitution class sitting there. But when I was a kid,
that makes more sense to me. By the way, because I've always thought it was very strange in part 6 that they're like, we have to return to be decommissioned. I'm like, you just fucking got this thing,
Yeah. So it's not only that it was built absurdly fast. Yeah, while you were messing around in the past, we just threw this together. No, yeah. And then again, right. Yeah. With Star Trek 6, that I think this is just the accepted. I think it started out as a fan theory and now fans just treat it as like, it has to,
that to me completely erases the, why are you decommissioning? Like, what a waste of money. All right. Before we move on from Search for Spock, the one thing that we haven't talked about at all, which is Christopher Lloyd as Cruise, which is, it's funny because I'm like, oh, it's Doc Brown. But this came out before Back to the Future, so I probably would have had a slightly easier time getting, because I was not a Who Framed Roger Rabbit kid. I didn't see that till much later in my life. So I would have had no frame of reference for who he was. That being said, like, I like the performance. It is what it is. It's a little hammy, but I also I like the ruthlessness. I love that beginning where he kills his girlfriend because she made the mistake of saying that she saw the thing, the Genesis files. Like, I think all that's good. I like his single-mindedness of just like, I want Genesis. And it leads to my all-time favorite Shatner quote, which I used to customize my computer back in the day. So whenever I shut down my computer, it would go, "I have had enough of
my God.
you."
I so badly want a better line right before.
Nope.
Oh boy.
Nope. There is no better line. There's no better take. That's exactly what it has to be. Maybe my favorite Shatner is and the hilarious backflip are my two favorite parts of that entire sequence.
Don't at me, bro. What an indignity that's how you have to die knowing that's what's like, really.
But here's the thing, you just said too, it's like, this has got to be the most stressful 3 days in Kirk's life. Just like sometimes when I tuck my kids in after a very long weekend, I'm just like, I have had enough of you. And I could just see like Kirk just being like, I am done with this entire episode, So
I'm with you. I really like Christopher Lloyd's performance in this. And I think this does kind of set the template for Klingons from this point on.
Yes.
They were depicted a little differently prior to this. So yeah, the movie's pretty important for that reason. I like that in some ways he's a dark mirror to Kirk. This is a film where Kirk sacrifices everything for his friend, whereas Kruge sacrifices his crew, his lover, maybe even his own honor in order to get control of the Genesis device. And maybe if his brutality came across less like it was being done for shock value and more like it was to establish some sort of philosophical contrast with Kirk. I mean, there is some of that still there. And some of this does feel like, yeah, we kind of did a lot of this with Khan already.
Right. That's the thing, you know?
So I wish his motivation as an antagonist amounted to a little bit more than, well, because I want it because it's a big, powerful weapon. And if you imagine something like the setup for Star Trek VI, where the Klingon Empire is in a very vulnerable and critical position, and not that I'd want to burn that idea in this film instead, but if Kruge had an even more compelling reason to bring this device back to the Empire, like so much of this story is about decay and rebirth. If the Klingon Empire is in a state of decay and he thinks a weapon this powerful can help restore them. And so by the end, Kirk is trying to save Spock, but he's trying to save a civilization. And it ties back to that idea again of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. I do appreciate that he's not just another Khan. I like that they were sort of, it seems to be they were like, let's not even try. That's an issue with some other Star Trek movies where it's like, let's just remix Khan. Let's not even hide that we're doing it in some cases.
No, it's John Harrison, Chris.
Sure. Yeah. And there are a lot of interesting ideas with this character that are simmering that just never reach a full boil. Like it's really.
Am I misremembering? Does he not say like the Federation wants this to create more? But he says it like one time, right?
And well, so this is the thing. I wish they had done more with this because I love the idea that to him, he never even seems to consider the possibility that the Federation wouldn't use the Genesis device as a weapon. Of course, that's what it is. So from his point of view, if the Klingon Empire isn't in control of it, someone else is going to use it on them. But I just need like a stronger motivation from him. I need to understand him a little bit more because it's a great performance, but an underwritten character.
I hate myself for even thinking in this way, but I'm so sorry. I wonder if you could have used the Zack Snyder Justice League where Steppenwolf is trying to get that mother box to get back in the good graces of Darkseid. Like we know that Kruge is kind of, the Klingons kind of almost disown him and what he's doing. Like if he wants Genesis to be able to restore his place in the Klingon Empire, kind of like Steppenwolf, you know?
That it just need, like I said, there's some really, really good stuff in there. We just need to bring it to a full boil. We just need to turn up the heat on it a little bit.
That being said, you know, overall, I think people said this because it was just kitschy and easy, but I don't believe in the odd, even number Star Trek good, bad thing because that's watch Nemesis again. It's
well, that's the one that broke it for sure. I mean, that I remember those conversations about, well, so much for that. But I mean,
Nemesis is not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's certainly like when you watch all of these, it definitely does break that a lot. And Wrath of Khan got used the way that Empire Strikes Back got used, where I remember them marketing that one as like, this is like our Wrath of Khan. I'm like, I don't think it is. Close. So I think that like Search for Spock, it's like, for some reason, I do think that Wrath of Khan is a better made film. It is visually more interesting. It's tighter. It's brisker. for some reason, I feel like Search for Spock is like easier to watch, and I do find myself putting that one on more than I do Wrath of Khan.
I mean,
I can't explain it. Maybe because it feels like the show, that it feels a little bit easier to digest, you know?
I can see that. I think that I like 3. I think the main thing working against it is what I said before. It's right smack dab in the middle of 2 of the most beloved Star Trek movies.
So let's talk about the second most beloved, which is Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, because I really thought this episode was going to be like, wow, it's crazy that he loves Search for Spock so much. But as I get older and as I'm rewatching, I actually think I've soured a little bit on The Voyage Home.
Interesting. I've had the opposite experience.
Oh, really? Okay, and not in a way where it's like, let me be clear, I really like The Voyage Home. I do. If we're just talking about these 3 films, though, it's the way I feel about Voyage Home is kind of the way I feel about Return of the Jedi, where when I was a kid, Voyage Home was my favorite, just like Return of the Jedi was. But as I get older, it's a little too kitschy for me in some places. Like, I really love the joke and the humor of the fish out of water. And I think a lot of that plays really well, even if you're not from that time period. You know, this came out in 86, so I was like 3 months away from being born when this came out. But I just feel like it goes on just a tad too long. By the time they're like rushing Chekhov out of the hospital, I usually am about like, okay, I'm ready to wrap this up now. Like, I would like to get back to, it just feels like the longest epilogue to the saga that we've been on.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. So I think if I were being uncharitable, I would say that 3 is sort of like a very long epilogue to 2. But, but 4 has a lot of, you know, I say all the time, it's like, people that listen to my podcast are probably sick of hearing it. Plot is not the same thing as story.
Sure.
So plot-wise, 4 seems very far removed from the 2 preceding films. But in terms of the story, and especially the story of Kirk and Spock, and again, these seeds that are being planted now, space seeds, if you will, for a lot of stuff that will pay off in Star Trek 6. Star Trek 4 is a hugely consequential film. I feel like I've had the opposite experience most people have had. This was like I said, this is another one we owned on VHS, but back then I watched 3 way more than this one. And like, I know it's a fan favorite, but 4 was a grower, not a shower for me. We had a very prolonged ponfar. I didn't dislike it. And I didn't mind that it was sillier than the others. That just wasn't my favorite flavor of Star Trek. And also, a lot of my other complaints with it when I was a kid, so superficial. There's no Enterprise in this one. Like, at the very end. But, you know, for the bulk of the film, that was a weirdly big deal for me. Didn't like that. But over time, I have really grown to appreciate this one. I know that, you know, Leonard Nimoy thought of himself as a very cerebral guy, and he was, but as a director, he seems so much more at home with lighter material. I mean, he directed 3 Men and a Baby for anyone that doesn't know. And in general, I think this is a better directed film than 3. He had clearly learned a lot from that previous experience. I love that there is a problem to solve, but no quote unquote bad guy.
Sure.
And I think this is just another instance where all of the things I disliked about it as a kid, those are all the reasons that this one is such a breath of fresh air now. If you want original formula Star Trek, you are all set. They've got you covered. In the meantime, this is a fun diversion. And at the time this was released, I mean, it's like 20 years that audiences had to fall in love with these characters. And after 2 pretty heavy films, it must have been really nice to get an entry that was all about just like taking a step back and letting them have a little bit of fun.
I mean, this is a movie where this could never happen with the Next Generation crew. Like
Mm.
Picard cannot have fun in the way that Kirk can, especially in a movie like this. I can't tell from your expression if you're like, no,
Well, what you said earlier about how you don't understand Picard people, I was tempted to say you're talking to one. But I don't even know that I could choose between Kirk and Picard. I love them both so much. But there is a softer side to Picard that's one of the reasons Next Gen it remains my number one favorite comfort show. That show ran for 7 seasons. And like I said, I was 5 when it premiered. It was just a very formative time in my life where I literally grew up with that show. Those characters, they feel like my family. That ship, it feels like home. And one of the things that was so gratifying about that 7-year journey with them was you do see them change. I know Deep Space Nine was the Star Trek show that really, really was allowed to get more into the serialized storytelling. But obviously, even in the Adventure of the Week stuff, over the course of 7 years, the characters grow, the relationships deepen, things change. And one of the really like beautiful things about Next Gen is Picard as a character, the way he softens, the way he learns to lighten up. And so I don't know. I don't know that you couldn't do something like this with
I just feel
the
like,
Next Gen cast.
And again, obviously, this is all subjective, right? To me, I feel like Picard is always the captain. That rank and file is always present. Even when he softens up, it's always like he's the leader and you are under him. And with things like the voyage home, it just feels to me like a bunch of friends hanging out. Yeah, but like Kirk is the captain, but it still doesn't, it just feels like a bunch of like, I just love the like, everybody's spread out, like it just feels like
it's so good.
That
it's
whole
so
sequence, the double dumbass on you, the nuclear vessels, like all of that is fantastic. And like I said, I don't have a problem with the concept of the movie at all. Actually, let me back that up. The only thing I have a problem with, and this kind of happens in time travel movies, they were just really quick to throw time travel down as like the plan. I'm just like, wait a minute. If this was so easily accessible, especially in a ship that is a third of the size of your other one, why didn't you do this when Khan was there? Why didn't you do this before?
So they introduced this in the original series, but even still, but if you're unaware of that, there is a real whiplash of like, what'd you say? And we're all cool with this. And then I just, as a rule, I am a big fan of time travel stories when that is just intrinsically, that is what this is about. Back to the Future is about time travel. Great. When series where time travel was not one of the core concepts initially, when it gets introduced, that's dicey for me. I don't always love that. Star Trek, it gets a little bit more leeway with me than other franchises would, but certainly after the last 2 movies.
It's like you chose the whale to go back
Spock died, David was killed, but the whales,
your ship was destroyed. Yeah, it's like, if this was on the table the whole time, come on, guys. I mean, I guess they do a decent enough job of making it feel like a dangerous thing. Like, I think I'd have a much bigger problem if it was like Avengers Endgame, where you could just push a button and you're there. Then I'd be like, guys, what are we doing here? There is like a little bit of a sense of danger, but it never to the extent that I would have just like loved if one character was like, you realize there's a 1 in 3 chance that we will just be obliterated before we ever get close to the sun.
Just really underline the fact, here is the reason we never do this.
Right.
I can see
it's
that.
It's not enough for me to dislike the movie because, as you said, like they time travel in this movie, but this movie is not about time travel, So like, I'm willing to be like, okay, sure. I love a lot of the stuff here. Again, I think I just get a little impatient. I do think that like for me, the joke runs out a little bit towards the end. Probably around the time, like, I think the last big laugh that gets out of me is like Scotty with the talking through the mouse.
Oh,
Like,
that's one of my favorite scenes.
You know?
Yeah, that's.
But that's about the point where I start to be like, okay, I get it. Like, let's get back now. Let's get back to the fish out of water stuff has run its course for me, and there's still like another sequence to go. The whole Chekhov stuff just feels like, okay, it's a hat on a hat. Like, can we just get back now? Like, I'm ready to wrap this up.
I like that. I mean, I think it's interesting that like Harv Bennett wrote all of the stuff set in the 23rd century. Nick Meyer, he writes all of the stuff set in 1986. And that's why it just, man, it moves with a clip, I think. I really like all of it. I like that the fish out of water stuff is very heavy when they first arrive. And yeah, there's traces of it as it goes. But I do like that at a certain point, it becomes more about, okay, but seriously, how are we going to get these whales out of here? How are we going to accommodate them in order to make this trip back? And I think it does a pretty good job of raising those stakes, creating more obstacles. The relationship between Kirk and Jillian, it's so good. Catherine Hicks is so freaking good in this movie. Isn't it
crazy that we got the two parents from Seventh Heaven?
I know.
Star Trek movies, and one of them is a disgrace in the worst Star Trek movie, and one of them is fantastic in one of the best Star Trek movies.
Wild that she just winds up in the future though at the end, and she's like, I'm working on a science ship now. What?
Just, I love like blue balled Kirk is just like, oh, all right, you know, like, yeah. That part I always thought was, I don't know if it's played for laughs, but it always made me laugh. Like, just the fact that she's just like, oh, I don't actually like want to date you. I just kind of wanted to like get out.
Thanks for the ride.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, it's the sexless innkeeper. Yeah,
I think it's.
I love her character. I think that she's like one of the best parts of this movie. I also just think like, and this is not a criticism of Voyage Home. I just can't think of where in this conversation to plop this thought in. I just think it's strange that we've had two movies where we focused so heavily on Genesis, and it's such a big thing, and then it's just like, we're never going to talk about it again. To my knowledge, it never pops up in other Star Trek lore. Like, I don't know, for the Genesis trilogy, maybe that's why to me this feels like such a long epilogue, is because there's no tie to Genesis at this point. And I don't know, maybe there doesn't need to be. I'm not saying like it fits organically into anything. I just think it's strange that like for such a life-changing thing for these people, we're never going to talk about it again after the end of Search for Spock.
I mean, we will. I don't know if it is. You would find it satisfying, and especially when you get into, other media like that. But that is a very valid point in terms of like, a trilogy inside the larger franchise. Even if that's not what they were intending it to be at the time, I think this is just indicative of like, this is just how we made movies, where it was like, we're going to build on what happened in the last one. There's going to be a through line with like, we're going to honor the way this character changed. We're going to honor the way the lore is evolving. This is just how we told stories once upon a time. But I can see, especially now in retrospect, where we do group these three together, that is an element that's missing.
And it's fine. Like, I'm not saying it has to. It just kind of feels like even there's kind of like less of a through line, or not through line, but it's like there's not as much connective tissue other than the very beginning of this movie. Yeah, Spock's getting his memory back, but like they don't even bother to recap the way that Search for Spock kind of like does the like, just in case you missed Wrath of Khan, here's what happened at the very end. Like, Voyage Home is just like, well, if you didn't see it, it doesn't really make that big of a difference, which is hilarious to me because more people saw Voyage Home than saw Search for Spock. Like, Voyage Home was more of a jumping on point for other people. You'd think you'd want to catch them up a little bit, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. They do give us the recap of the Enterprise being destroyed. And I always love, and I think this happens in other Star Trek movies for sure, where we're just watching the characters watch the movie. Where like it's supposed to be like there's the other part in Star Trek 3 where Kirk is reviewing the footage of what happened right before Spock gets killed, and it's just he's just watching Star Trek 2, and it's so nice.
Like, where was the camera? Yeah,
yeah, you got your the reverse angle. That's handy, and then especially the destruction of the Enterprise. Who was filming that? Where'd that come from? Can we see it from another angle, though? Oh, you did. You did get closer. Thank you. Wow.
I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know if you do, but was there some Crispin Glover type shenanigans going on? Why did they refilm Kirk doing the stand-ups for the Genesis video instead of having the Carol Marcus one in there?
Oh, I'm not sure. I wonder if that's why.
I honestly don't know, but it is kind of funny that Kirk was like, I could do this better. Just let's just roll a couple and let me see if I can do this. Like, he doesn't add any new information. It's like there's no reason for him to refilm that unless he was going to add like we've learned since the whatever. Anyways,
it'd be funny if he was like, so I've just been working on this on the weekends. Came up with something pretty cool. Take a look.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Okay, Voyage Home. The other thing, this is another random thought that doesn't belong anywhere, but like every time I watch this, that pizza they order looks so fucking good. I always want pizza when I watch this movie. There's something about these Star Trek movies and pizza that I'm like very intrinsically linked to. Like, because I have very vivid memories of watching Search for Spock in my parents' room on their little 13-inch TV with like a Domino's pizza.
Man, pizza always looks so much better in certain movies. Like, I've never in my life held a piece of pizza that looks as good as the slices everyone's eating at the beginning of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2.
I mean, even the like kind of gross, but yet I still want it looking hydrated pizzas from Back to the Future too. I'm like, I want to eat that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's the whole aesthetic of that scene, the breadsticks, the cups, the whole vibe of like, yeah, remember when we used to just like go out to Pizza Hut for dinner?
Remember when we were at Proper People's, you know?
I'll tell you.
And I do think like, even though time has passed and a lot of those things like aren't relevant, like it still feels relatable. I would love to ask my 5-year-old in like 10 years if she watches this. She won't. If it feels like just as foreign as watching Kirk have a drink in the Regula or space station, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I like the humor. I still think works. Like, even though like the aesthetics are dated, the humor doesn't seem dated. Like, a lot of those jokes are still very funny. One thing I do hate about this movie, I do not like the score for this one.
Oh, it's the worst. I'm okay kind of with the main theme, like over the titles, but when you were talking about the hospital scene, that one in particular has always stood out to me as just, I remember even as a kid being like, what is this? This is not how we do a Star Trek movie. Like, even the bad Star Trek movies have great music.
It just, again, another strange choice. You had a musical continuation in Search for Spock of James Horner and a lot of repeated, I'm not going to say repeated cues, but repeated themes and motifs. And then we get to this one. It's like, what the fuck are these big Christmas bell, Irwin Allen 80s sounding shit? No.
I know.
This is wrong.
I think it was Nimoy that really pushed for this guy. And he also, this same composer also scored RoboCop 2. The first RoboCop has one of the all-time great film scores, the Basil Polidorus score. That main RoboCop theme is incredible. And then RoboCop 2, just like, I mean, it really shits the bed with that. And like, oh, it's the same guy? Is this just what he does?
That's what you'd save him under your phone as, the bed shitter. When you just need to save a couple bucks, get the bed shitter. Yeah, it kind of like pulls me out a little bit, because I just really dislike the score. And again, it's just like, it's one more thing that feels disjointed from the other two. It's not like this movie feels like completely separate, but it is a little bit of death by a thousand paper cuts. There's just a little things here and there all over the place that I'm like, I guess you didn't have to visually or whatever stick to the last two. It just seems strange that you didn't. Like, all the pieces were already there. Why did you mix it up, you know?
Well, I'm sure you came across this in your research, but this was almost even more wildly removed from the previous movies, where instead of Jillian, that character was going to be Eddie Murphy.
Right.
It was written for Eddie Murphy. And like at Paramount, they knew Murphy was a Star Trek fan, and they thought, he's a hot commodity. Star Trek is a hot commodity. Let's combine the two things. I feel like I love both of those things. I don't necessarily need them together. It feels like a real Richard Pryor Superman 3 situation. I was just going
to say, how did they not learn from Superman 3 that was just not going to work?
We're gonna undermine what's great about both of these things, I think.
Right,
maybe we should keep them separate.
You're not going to have a peanut butter turkey sandwich and have it be delicious. Like, it just doesn't work. So I'm glad, although I would like to visit the alternate timeline where it exists just to see it, just to see what they came up with.
I don't know, maybe. I can't imagine not having the Jillian character in here. That's one of the very best things about the film. And then the Eddie Murphy thing, it becomes a stunt casting thing where then instead of the one with the whales, which is how everyone refers to this, it's the one with Eddie Murphy. And that just feels incompatible.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of, I'm pretty sure it's not happening anymore, but that's exactly what would happen if Quentin Tarantino ever did his Star Trek. It would be the one Quentin did. That's all we would say,
Yeah.
I do love, like, especially, now with surround sound technology and everything, the probe sounds are very cool.
Man.
Yeah. I do like that. It's just like a little touch, but even the probe, like, it's just a floating toilet paper roll, but it's still, for some reason, I really like it,
It's so, it's alien in the best way. Yeah, no, there's no like visual reference for it. You can't say, oh, so it was inspired by what?
Right.
Yeah. A toilet paper roll and a volleyball? I don't know. How did you arrive at this? But the sound design of the movie is incredible. That just reminded me, speaking of the probe, I may be misremembering this, but I think one of the ships that it completely destabilizes, the life support goes out, everybody dies, is the Yorktown, which in the fan theory where that gets rechristened as the Enterprise A. Wow. So congratulations. Here's your new Enterprise. Everybody on board fucking died. There's fucking ghosts everywhere.
There's so many ghosts.
If you can time travel, there are also ghosts. Why?
I cannot dispute that that's exactly what happened. So I'll take your word for it. And I like the idea of a haunted Enterprise,
I think in Star Trek V, it begins with they're having all of these technical issues with their new Enterprise. And I think it's this. I think it's the ghosts. The next time you watch the movie, now.
I know we're not talking about Star Trek V, but can I just really, really quickly make a slight defense for it? For two reasons. One, and I know you said you read it, but William Shatner's book about Star Trek movie memories, just this movie was fucked before it ever got started, and the fact that he was even able to make it, and I get he probably exaggerated a lot of it, but like that movie had every odd stacked against it. And two, the same way that I defend Avengers Age of Ultron, it is the only Star Trek movie where everybody is the rank they are supposed to be. The Enterprise is not in like a refitted that someone has to inspect. It doesn't get destroyed. It is the only one of those that is just an adventure with this crew, start to finish. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, we're done. And for that reason alone, I put it above motion picture.
I told you, there's things I like about all of them. Star Trek V has some really great stuff with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. There's a handful of really, really great moments. And that I think it does highlight something that 4 does really well, though, which is a lot of the comedy in this one, in 4, it's character-based, but they don't... Star Trek V derives a lot of comedy from making fun of the characters in a way that just feels different than the way 4 handles it, where they're out of their element in 4, but 5, it just kind of reduces them to, I don't know, it makes fools of some of the supporting cast. That's something that's always rubbed me the wrong way about that one. But even still, there are things I also like about Star Trek V.
Remind me to tell you a story about Star Trek V when we're off the air, because that is one that I'm not going to put in the public record, and you can all leave a comment what you think it is. Okay, so going back to Star Trek 4, the reason why I brought up Star Trek V too is because I think ultimately I love these 3 movies, and even though 4 kind of feels like we're already starting to move away from the Genesis trilogy, it does conclude that story.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't overlook the fact that also when you get to 5, it's like I said, this whole trilogy is kind of pointless in the sense of that we didn't lose anything. The status quo didn't change. And these characters kind of didn't change either. Even all these big lessons that we learned, we're still the same characters, which is fine. I'm not complaining. I just think it is kind of interesting that these great movies, and it's just what a long way around to getting all the way back to where we kind of started,
That's why it is really interesting to consider Nick Meyer's point about Spock should have stayed dead.
Mm-hmm.
The ramifications of that Genesis device, that's not something you just hand wave away in the next one. That, interesting to consider. It's hard to imagine Star Trek without Spock, but that's a valid point. But I'll tell you,
go ahead,
so when my wife and I were rewatching all of the movies, and sometimes it was in consecutive nights, other times you would take a day or two and then we'll put the next one on. 4 arrives exactly when it needs to. I mean, 2 and 3, they pack a pretty big emotional wallop. I described 4 as a breath of fresh air. That is really how it feels when you marathon these things. It's just a really, really great kind of, not intermission, but it's just a fun, light diversion in between some other pretty heavy. And it just sits there right in the middle.
Yeah. And I think that's why I don't crap on 4, and I'm not even saying I'm just saying it's my least favorite of those 3, but I still love it. I do find it kind of interesting that it's 5 just decides that okay, that part is over, we're starting over now, and then 6 is well, let's make some of that actually matter again. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that's because Nicholas Meyer is back at the helm again.
Yeah.
But I really do feel as much as I am a fan of Star Trek and this crew and the original series, when I think of this crew, I do think of the movies. I think I'm a bigger fan of the Star Trek movies than I am of even that 3-season show.
Oh, yeah. Well, so one thing I think is surprising when you go back and watch the original series, which I adore, but the extent to which it very much is Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and some other people are also here.
Mm-hmm.
the movies are where we see a little bit more of everyone else. And even that is like, listen, the big three, that's always the primary focus. And it's not like I'm saying everyone else gets a ton of stuff to do, but there are moments of these movies that feel a little bit more balanced than a lot of the episodes of the show.
Which is so funny because, and I totally get it. The big three in the current, the Chris Pine or whatever, it's McCoy's out. It's Uhura's in. She's the third one, which I think is kind of interesting. And again, it's just like Star Trek evolves. It's ever evolving. I don't know if you're a fan of Strange New Worlds. I like how that plugs into everything that's kind of already there. But these movies are something that like I go through phases where I'm just like super into Star Trek. And I tend to get like, I can get a lot of it out of my system by rewatching like 1 through 6. And then I feel pretty satiated, you know?
Yeah.
Or, sorry,
I definitely think
rephrase, 2 through 6. I ain't watching 1.
The original cast has, the movie served them better than the next gen crew was served by their films. As much as I loved one of your OG episodes on Star Trek Generations, because I also really like Generations, but and I like First Contact, but yeah, by and large, next gen, their movies, they were not as successful creatively as this run for the original cast.
Yeah, and part of me feels like that's what sets this Genesis trilogy apart. Is like these movies feel like they exist to serve this bigger story, whereas like the next gen ones kind of feel like, here's an episode. Do you like this episode? No. Okay, then here's a different episode with a different feel, a different theme. Like Generations could not feel, look, sound any more different than the movie that comes after it if you tried. You know?
Yeah.
And there's no through line there, whereas like I do like the through line of these movies, even the ones that like, you know, one excluded, like something like 5 that doesn't fit into this. It still feels like it's all a part of it. And I do kind of like that they're getting older, because I feel like once Shatner embraces that he's getting older, Kirk is such a more fun character. I love so many of like the little moments, you know, when it's like Wrath of Khan, like, Captain, don't you want to finish the inspection? He's like mouthing later, like those little teeny things. He's just a little bit more of a smartass. And yes, it's there in the original series, but he still has to be the captain. This one feels like he's much more relaxed. They all feel more relaxed. I feel like I'm hanging out with them. And I love these movies. Even 1 is fine. I'll put it up.
Oh, look at that. You went on a real journey here too.
I did. It's just like, I don't want to hate anything. Just like, oh my God, I've never seen a movie that loves the smell of its own farts in the first 20
I mean,
minutes.
I can see how if in 1979, Star Trek's been off the air as long as it has, you go to see this movie, and to see it presented in that way, to go from the TV budget to something that big and sprawling, and even the 30 minutes we spend being introduced to the new Enterprise, you know, that the new design of the Enterprise. I don't know. I bet there were a lot of people that ate that up at the time. It's just,
I'm
like,
sure.
I bet that was overwhelming. I'm not disagreeing with you. Look, they wear pajamas. The Enterprise looks like a Hilton. That's the thing about 2 is it's like, it's not just a great storytelling. There's also the entire aesthetic of Star Trek gets rewritten for the next decade by that movie. The interiors of the ship, they look more like a submarine. Starfleet suddenly feels a little bit more militaristic, which I know Roddenberry was very against, but the Navy influence specifically. Sure. The monster maroons, the introduction of those uniforms, that's the look of those movies. Like it's a game changer. It's incredible.
I'm always very sad when I get to the end of 6. And it really is for all intents and purposes. I know they all show up in different, you know, Spock's in the Next Generation, and 3 of them will show up in Generations. But for the most part, minus Sulu, that's the last time that they're all together. And
yeah,
that's a bummer. But all good things, right?
For sure.
Did you see, it must be like a year ago now. That really weird fan film that came out of like Kirk. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
This is where I'm gonna have the super unpopular opinion. People ate that up. I hated it.
I just didn't know what it was like. What is it saying? What does it mean? I don't know. I just thought it was like, and they got Robin Curtis back.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
it was like, oh, where's Spock's unborn child, you weirdo? God, I hate that so much. There's got to be a reason. Like they must have known it was terrible, or else they would have kept. I heard there's a deleted scene from 4 where they say that's why she's staying. I don't know if that's true, but I think it's in the novel.
Maybe, or I've definitely read that was part of the story at some point.
Someone had the brains to be like, don't do that. Take that out. That's terrible. Spock could never look her in the face again, I'll tell you that. I mean, I don't know why they didn't bring her back for 6 and they put Sex in the City in there, but
they wanted to.
Yeah.
And I there's some conflicting things about Nick Meyer wanted Kirstie Alley, not Robin Curtis. That was maybe one of but the big thing was the feeling that Saavik would not betray the Federation, and so you have to create a new character. No, I'm not agreeing.
No, I know. I'm just thinking
this is why.
Wouldn't it be interesting if she did?
It
right?
would have, yeah.
Instead of this whole new character that you could smell from a mile away that she's a bad guy. Anyways, this is the discussion I wanted. I think 2 years from now, I'm going to be driving around town and listening to all my old stuff and be like, I'm so glad that this exists now. And it's not just a ping pong discussion in my head of what I think you or anyone else would say. Like, I'm just glad it's all on the record. I love these movies. I do love Star Trek. I don't know why I say it every time I do a Star Trek related thing as if it's like a surprise, but yeah, I love these characters, and I hope that they find a way to make another one with like Pine and Quinto and everything, because I like Kirk, Spock, and all of them. I love these characters, whoever's playing them, and I want to see them back.
I'm more in the camp of I'm done with the prequels. Star Trek lately has had a real been there, done that quality to it. I enjoyed the first 2 seasons of Strange New Worlds a lot, but I am ready. Like there's talk of not remaking, but we're going to do a new riff on the original series with this new actor that plays Kirk in that show. I don't want that. I want what Next Generation was at the time, which is like Roddenberry. One of the very smart decisions he made about that was this is not going to be too reverential to the original series or referential. None of the original characters, other than McCoy makes the cameo in the pilot, but like this is not going to be about what came before. New ship, new crew, new adventures, new aliens, like just new stories, new. I want Star Trek in the future, new ship, new crew, redefine the aesthetic for me again. And I know Discovery did this, but I mean like let's do it for real. Like let's get a steadier hand in charge of this. And I'm more about pushing this forward. I think Star Trek has done enough looking back.
Fair. I guess I will say, like, I do like recontextualizing some of the thing. Like, I love what they've done with the Gorn in Star Trek Strange New Worlds and kind of like revisiting these things that were hokey and turning them into something legitimate. But I also love, like, barring whatever you like, I love that we're at least at a point where Star Trek has sort of become this thing where it's like it's a buffet. Like you don't have to eat everything that's there, and there's plenty of stuff that's there if you like it. And it seems like there's going to be more stuff rolling in. There's a whole Starfleet show that I think could be interesting. So Star Trek will live on. These movies will live on forever. Probably Wrath of Khan is going to still be the bar for at least my lifetime, but Who knows?
Isn't that amazing?
Right?
Yeah, that's probably true.
Everything will be just the way that like Empire Strikes Back is never probably going to be the bar for, like, it's never not going to be the bar for Star Wars,
Right?
Or sequels.
Yeah.
How many times you just hear it's like, oh, it's the Empire Strikes Back of whatever this franchise is, you know?
Yeah, it just created this expectation that like, well, the sequel has to be darker.
I think Wrath of Khan has become this like, oh, we understood that we messed up the first time. Let us make a second first impression, you know? And what a great impression it made. Chris, you always make a great impression. Where can people find you? Since the last time we talked was 4 years ago, has your address changed?
No, I'm still at my podcast is still Rogues Gallery, where, yeah, I mean, the conceit is that it's a different villain or anti-hero from pop culture, movies, TV, comic books, video games, whatever. We kind of do like a case file that we assemble on them, but mostly it's just a very loose framework to hang a discussion about this media on. So we have a pretty extensive back catalog at this point. As I mentioned, we did an episode on Khan. So we talked about Star Trek II, Space Seed, and Into Darkness. Just a pretty wide-ranging conversation about all of them. One of our earliest episodes, still one of my favorites. Check that out. And if you dig it, just, look for some other episodes that grab your interest.
Yeah, I love that show. Like I said, I started to listen to the Wrath of Khan, but I didn't want to double dip. But I started listening to like the Deep Blue Sea one and a couple of other ones. So it's a really fun show. Check it out. As for me, you know the drill at this point. There'll be a new episode when there's something to talk about. When I'm scratch the itch. Chris, thanks for scratching me, bud.
I live to serve.
Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.